Let's talk power and the speaker for a laptop. And I have a close up of the power brick that this Toshiba laptop uses and also the battery. And if you need to replace any of these, let's say the power brick goes bad for some reason, or the DC jack portion of the power brick gets damaged for some reason, you'll have to replace this. You got to replace it with the same exact part number. So you got to locate that. And here it shows you Toshiba part number PA5177U-1ACA. And that's important because this particular power supply is going to use a specific voltage and amperage rating, and that's down here, and that's 19 volts and 2.37 amps. Now, even if you were to find another power pack that has the same specifications as this, I wouldn't recommend using it for a couple different reasons. Always go with the same exact power pack. Make sure you get the right power brick from the manufacturer. And over here we have the battery. This is a close up of the battery. And you'll see the voltage is actually different for this. And that's because the power is actually converted as it goes through the system. But if you need to replace the battery, which is more likely than the power pack, you're going to be using a Li-ion battery from Toshiba. You want to get the manufacturer battery and make sure it's the exact right. The model number for this, PA5195U1BRS. Here's another technical tip for you. Make sure that your laptop is turned off and that the power is disconnected before you change out the battery or do any work with the battery. Make sure that it is disconnected. And again, you don't want to swap batteries out with other laptops, but generally you can't because almost all the batteries are a different size and shape. So that's not really going to be possible. So those are your two items there with the power brick and the battery. The battery could be that can go bad over time because it only holds so many charges. It could be damaged. There's a lot of possibilities with that. And this port is actually soldered onto the board. So if this port was to go bad, you'd have to resolder a new one or replace the whole board, which, can be a bit difficult. Usually that doesn't go bad, so that's not usually a problem. What's more likely to go bad is the DC in jack. And that's right over here. This guy right here. And that's because when people connect to the DC in jack, quite often they might wiggle the connection or jiggle it in there, and it could cause damage over time. In the past, this DC in jack was soldered to the motherboard, and if that's the case, it could be a bit of a difficult fix. But in this case, this guy just pulls right out and just has a connector. So we can actually take that guy and just pull him straight out of there, and then he's just got a connector here, and you can pull that right out. And so you see it's just a typical 4-pin connector. And you can swap out the whole DC in jack. This is part number ST5034. So that's the guy I would use for that. Real easy change out. And that's a good thing for Toshiba, good thing for the laptop industry is in general, that it's not soldered onto the board. Because they do get damaged fairly frequently just because of the wiggling of the jack. Or maybe someone leaves the jack plugged in, the power brick plugged into the laptop, and then puts it in the laptop bag and it goes on transit or it goes on a plane and who knows what happens and it shifts around in there and damages the plug. And sometimes these just go bad in general. So easy repair for that. So there's another portion of the power. And I've turned the laptop 90 degrees clockwise. And we're looking at the corner here. This is where the power button is underneath. If the power button was to fail, all you'd need to do is disconnect this little connector here. And then remove this little tiny circuit board. That's where the power button is, right underneath this connector. And there's a little sticker here that you can remove, and then a screw to take off. And that's basically it. You'll get the replacement part for that, and you can get a replacement button as well Sometimes they're sold together as a kit. So that's another thing that might fail, the power button. Sometimes people hit it too hard, or it just fails over time due to usage or what have you. So that's a pretty easy fix also. All these fixes, though, they require opening up that case of the laptop. So again, if you have a warranty, make sure you check first. If you open a case, you're going to void that warranty if you do have one. And so that's pretty much everything you need to know for power for the exams. You got your power button, you've got your power brick, you've got your battery, you've got your battery connection, and you've got that DC in jack as well. Very important. The last thing I want to talk about real quick was the speakers. Sometimes the speakers will fail, not quite as often anymore, but on a typical laptop like this, it's considered a stereo system, which means it has two speakers, and they're in little housings, and you can pull those housings right off. And you can see, there you go. There's your speaker. That's right. That's a speaker. And that's why stuff sounds pretty tinny on most laptops, because the speaker is tiny. But that just connects with two standoff screws. And the other one here is the same thing. It's got two standoff screws as well. And both of these connect to this connector. So if one speaker fails, really, you're going to have to replace both of them as a kit. You could try to solder on two wires onto the connector, but I wouldn't recommend it. It's going to come as a kit with both speakers and this connector here, which you'll plug back into this. So that's a pretty easy fix too. You really just pull these off and pull both off and replace them. Make sure that you're doing it for the exact laptop though, because this is, I believe, an E45. And even the difference between this model, the E45, and the E55 has a different design of speakers. So, you got to make sure you're getting it for the exact model. And so, again, if the speakers fail, that's it. You're going to replace both speaker housings, and those connect to the plug. Here, there's a little piece of tape that's just covering up this and holding the wire down. So that's the only reason for that. And so that's basically it. That's your power and your speakers. Pretty easy fixes for most of these. The main key here is compatibility. Remember to use products that come from the manufacturer and that they're the right model, the right part number for that particular model of laptop.